Hello out there, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Mules Rider Chronicles podcast. I am Craig Marlette, the Mules Rider, and the stories you will hear on this show are from my own life, as I have traversed the planet on my quest for the true meaning of life. Stories many people find either totally outrageous, hard to believe, or both. Today's story was one that taught me not to prejudge people before you get to know them, as they may turn out to be a lot different than what you thought. And don't underestimate your own potential to be just plain old human either. So hop up on my mule here and let's get ready for the next story entitled The Beautiful Blonde on Burr Oak. If you were to ask the average woman on any given day what it is that makes a man tick, most would probably answer in two words: sex and sex, not necessarily in that order. Since Sigmund Freud released his elaborate theories about libido in the subconscious mind, the poor descendants of Adam have been placed inescapably into the category of the sex fiend. Not that we don't deserve it. I mean, when you realize that Eve was created as a direct answer from God to Adam's heartfelt cry of need, you can pretty much figure Adam wasn't craving a new car that day. Although the Bible doesn't say so, I have an idea that when God came through, Adam probably said to himself, "And on the 8th day God made woman, and it was very, very good." My wife told me of a television talk show she had watched recently where the hostess interviewed a group of professional exotic dancers. Each made her living prancing naked in front of men in topless bars. When asked what would motivate them to do this kind of work, almost every one of them said the money was good, but what they really liked best about their job was being able to torment men without having to give them anything. Tantalization without gratification. I never understood why men would subject themselves to such torture. Hearing this reminded me of all the names my wife would call me whenever she was in the final minutes of labor during the birth of our children. If you want to know what women really think about men, you don't need to ask a topless dancer about it. Just take a Lamaze class and be there when the labor pain starts happening.
Craig, you dirty rat! Blah, blah, blah,
I remember
blah,
my
blah,
first
blah.
awareness of my own sexual proclivity. I lived on Burr Oak Street in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and at the end of our street lived a policeman who shared his home with his adult daughter. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She drove a baby blue Thunderbird convertible, and on Saturdays she would take us kids in the neighborhood for rides in her car. I was always first in line, so I could sit in the front seat and watch her long blonde hair blowing in the wind. She loved life, and she loved her new convertible, and of course, I loved her. I was only 7 years old at the time, and quite a novice on the subject, but have no doubt it was true love. I can also recall several of my teachers who had inspired the poet living inside of me.
Did my heart love till now? Forswear its sight, for I ne'er saw true beauty till this night.
Though unlike some of the school teachers of today, they never offered to put wings on my imagination. Still, I'm pretty sure that given the opportunity, I would have provided added credence to the idea that men just live for sex from the day they are born. Growing up in a large family gives you a lot of opportunities to learn from others. I learned much from my oldest brother Larry, often spying on phone calls to his girlfriends, and though it seemed like just good fun to me at the time, some of the stuff actually sunk in and became useful later on when developing my own techniques for wooing those of the female persuasion.
Hey, cutie, how about a little smooch?
We were still kids, though, and it all seemed kind of silly when you got right down to it. Like the time my brothers and I found some of my father's prophylactics. We spent the whole day filling them with water and throwing them at the local neighborhood kids.
Ow! Oops!
To be fair, though, I don't really think that sex is the only thing a man thinks about. There's also work. Though coming in a distant second, there's no doubt that a man's work is very important to him. How else is he going to get the money he needs to get a woman so he can have sex? It all makes sense when you realize that it was while Adam was hard at work, naming all the animals, that he first became aware of his need for a woman.
Hippopotamus. Cow. Pig. Hey, something's missing.
I guess while Adam was watching him carry out the old be fruitful and multiply command, he got the idea that he was being shortchanged in the deal. How was he going to do his part without some outside help? So God, being the ever-understanding Father that he is, took a rib out of Adam,
Ouch! Where you going with that?
and made Eve. He also made Annie Hoyd. Annie was the other woman who lived down the street from me on Burr Oak. About 70 years old, Annie Hoyd wore black dresses with black hose and heavy black shoes, all covered neatly by a black shroud that went all the way down to the ground. She had no teeth, and as she walked with her back bent over, holding a cane in her hand, her heavy breathing made her cheeks go in and out, like the gills of a freshly caught fish lying on the pier. It was for this last attribute that my brother Terry nicknamed her Annie Hoyd the Blowy. I only saw Annie when she would come out of her house and make the trek to the little grocery store on the corner to buy the things she needed for her daily life. Since I never went out when she was on the street, or rather watched in fear from our living room window, I was certain that she was a witch, and that given the opportunity she would catch me and take me up to her attic and make a stew out of me so she wouldn't have to go out for groceries as often as she did now.
Come in, little boy. What are you afraid of?
My constant diet of Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi movies on Saturday mornings probably didn't help with the situation. But nevertheless, I knew Annie Hoyd was someone to be avoided at all cost. My schedule for outings worked well except for the day our toilet overflowed. My mother worked as a waitress at the Canary restaurant and my father sold cars, so we always had a babysitter when I was growing up. In those days, babysitters didn't just park themselves in front of the TV and eat popcorn. They usually cleaned the house too. On Burr Oak Street, our sitter was a black lady named Pearl. Pearl had a religious background and told us she spent her off days in church praying for our souls, and probably mostly for my dirty little mind, knowing how much I liked riding with the blonde down the street. Being good Episcopalians ourselves, which meant we went to church every Easter, Mom and Grandma didn't know why she needed to do that. But since they figured that prayer never hurt anyone, there was no harm in Pearl lifting us up to the Lord on her days off. We lived in a big house with my grandmother Knowles, and our extra bathroom was on the 3rd floor. In those days, you could still find the old tank-style toilets with a large water reservoir that was attached to the wall about 3 feet above the stool. They all had a hang-down pull chain for releasing the water supply when flushing. This allowed for quite a bit of water storage, which meant that when flushing our toilet from the 3rd floor, the downward pressure was similar to a miniature version of Niagara Falls, including the loud roar of water rushing through the pipes as it raced to reach its destination somewhere underground. Potty training rarely took place at this height, as you could lose a small child in the process if you weren't careful. The 3rd floor bathroom also offered another function, which was to provide Pearl with a good hiding place whenever she wanted a break from the kids and a brief respite from the ever-watchful eye of Grandma Knowles. Being on the 3rd floor as it was, Grandma wasn't usually in the mood to climb that height at her age, and if she yelled up the stairs, Pearl could always say that she was using the toilet and didn't hear her calling. This was often validated by a well-timed pull on the chain, which would send the water loudly rushing through the pipes in the walls, providing a great alibi for Pearl's hearing impairment. One day, while Pearl was taking one of her hourly breaks, she did one chain pull too many in an effort to cover her absence. The toilet began to run over, and poor Pearl, not being able to locate the plunger, and having my baby sister and brother to look out for, panicked at the sight of this fast-flowing river running wild on her shift. She immediately fell to her knees and began crying out to God to stop this catastrophe and forgive her for taking too many breaks. When this strategy failed to halt the rising water, she screamed, ran into the nearest bedroom, and locked the door behind her, taking up residence in the rocking chair while holding the crying babies, who had been suddenly roused from their peaceful naps. Unable to deal with a rapidly deteriorating situation, she now began praying at the top of her voice, begging the Lord to stop the toilet from running over, while interspersing her loud supplications with gospel songs about the Israelites crossing the River Jordan. Of course, with the water pouring down from the stool at 20 gallons per minute, the ground floor pump continued to fill the reservoir to replace what was being rapidly emptied out onto the floor and now running down the stairway. Grandma Knowles, hearing the water rushing through the pipes and noting that it was taking quite a bit longer than usual, ran to the stairs, where she was immediately greeted by a fast-developing Mississippi and the distant sound of Pearl's shouts of, "Lord help me, Lord save these babies," while singing, "When you walk through the river, it will not overflow you."
Oh, Lord, it's a flood like Noah. Help me, Lord. Save me, Lord.
Grandma rushed me outside to the safety until she could solve the toilet problem. Out into the street, where Annie Hoyd was just passing by on her way to the grocery store. I was banished to the sidewalk, right into the path of my own personal horror movie. I froze like someone who had just realized Dracula was closing in and that he'd left his crucifix at home. She came right up to me, wearing her black dress with her heavy black shoes and her black lace wraparound cloak that covered her hair and went all the way to the ground. I couldn't breathe or even blink. She came closer, her toothless mouth breathing in and out, making her cheeks look like the furnace bellows I'd seen in the blacksmith shop on Gunsmoke. She leaned over me so close that I could smell the heavy scent of mothballs and perfume, obviously used to cover the odor of the casket where she slept in my 7-year-old imagination. She reached down and touched my trembling hand and said quietly, "Don't be afraid. Everything will be all right." Then she just walked away, down the street to the little market on the corner to do her daily shopping. I felt a cold flush of relief, as if I just beat up the school bully, only to find out that we could now be best friends. Annie Hoyd the Blowy suddenly became the nice old lady who lived next door. Looking back now, I realize that Annie Hoyd was probably just an elderly Catholic woman who tried to remain faithful to her understanding of God and how he wanted her to live. Maybe she had lost her husband and had committed herself to a life of mourning and prayer, wanting to remain true to him until they eventually were reunited again in heaven. She probably tolerated all of the stares and passing taunts of the neighborhood kids, knowing they couldn't understand her life. Possibly she had read Sigmund Freud at some time in her past and realized that all little boys, being just underdeveloped men, would eventually become grown-ups with only one thing on their minds. Annie Hoyd was not about to contribute to their precarious situation by being provocative in any way. Maybe Freud was right. Maybe it's true that all men in their natural condition spend most of their time thinking about the beautiful girl with long blonde hair driving a convertible into the sun, inviting them to take a ride into paradise. Or maybe Adam is still on a quest, trying to find the perfect fit for the empty hole that left such an ache in his side, not realizing that it's his own rib that he's missing. It seems strange now, but I can hardly remember what the beautiful blonde on the corner actually looked like, though I can still see Annie Hoyd in my mind, as clear as if it were just yesterday that I last saw her passing by my house. That day when she reached down into my fears to tell me everything would be all right, reminding me that when all of our nightmares and our fantasies come to an end, we're all just people living in a world with other people who have the same struggles, the same fears, the same wants and needs, and the same dreams. Annie Hoyd didn't drive a convertible, but I think she knew exactly who she was and where she was going. Pearl, after a hearty scolding from my mom, managed to keep her job that day by leaning on mercy and claiming that her mother would not let her come home if she got fired. Even Episcopalians understand the occasional need for mercy. I guess that was as close as the babysitter got to an answer to all her prayers that morning. And me, I found a new friend that day. Not that we ever talked again after that episode in front of the house, but I slept better knowing that I wasn't on the dinner menu at Annie's. I grew up a little that day, learning that there was more to a woman than just the feelings I got watching the beautiful girl drive her car with her long blonde hair blowing in the wind. I still lined up early that Saturday for her front seat, but it was easier to keep my eyes on the road, wondering what lay ahead for me. Well, thanks for listening to my story today. Hope you found something in it that will help you navigate through your own journey with a better perspective on the experiences of your own life and the people you will meet along the way. If you like the show, tell all your friends and invite them to join us on the journey as well. So until next time, this is the Mules Rider saying, so long.